we're up to week number 9 in terms of the simulated match week, and apparently we were supposed to have 11 games that was going to happen in this simulated match week, but for whatever reason, we only got 10 games that was played, and the one game that did not play was the other Cascadia derby between the Portland Timbers and the Vancouver Whitecaps, and it seemed like in this virtual world there is still a shelter-in-place protest that is happening, and that protest in Portland got really ugly between the protester and the police, and it got so ugly that the Timbers were thinking of playing the game behind closed door, but unfortunately that method didn't work out because the protester decided to block the entrance, and even some Timbers fan decided to block the entrance to make sure that this game was not going to be playing behind closed doors. So as a result, that game has been suspended, and it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if that game is going to be replayed. I heard there's rumors saying that the Portland Timbers might face disciplinary issue because of that, and one of the disciplinary issue that they are going to do is a pretty heavy fine, and also they're forced to forfeit that game and give 3 points to the Vancouver Whitecaps. But we shall see in the upcoming day what the verdict will be in terms of that very ugly scene that happened in that before that game was supposed to kick off. But that being said, let's talk about the other 10 games that actually happened this week, and we start off with the first game between New England and Montreal, two bottom feeders in the Eastern Conference. Well, the Impact is a bottom feeder in the Eastern Conference, but New England themselves has also been struggling in recent week, and the struggle continues this week when they play against the Impact, as they lost 3-1 against them. Lassi Lappeenainen opened his scoring for Montreal in the 16th minute. Then DeJuan Jones unfortunately scored an own goal to give Montreal a 2-0 lead as we head to the halftime break. Now in the second half, Montreal continued to dominate. Bojan was able to score to make it 3-0 in favor of Montreal before Pineda did get one back for New England as a consolation goal. But yeah, the struggle is definitely on for the refs right now, and you wonder that Bruce Arena magic that people have been talking about, it feels like it is starting to run out on him, and it'll be interesting to see if New England continue to struggle like this, whether or not if Bruce Arena might actually either resign as the head coach of the Refs, or the fact that he probably is going to get fired. But as for Montreal, you know, this is a much needed win, considering the last couple of weeks has been very brutal for this team. But I don't think they should get too excited about this victory, because they were playing against a New England team that was struggling for the past couple of weeks. But that being said, moving on in terms of the next match. Speaking of struggle, LAFC. I don't think throughout this whole season that I would ever get to say struggle is a word to describe LAFC, because for most of this year, even though I know for the past couple of games they haven't really got the resort, you would think eventually they would get it right, and eventually they would take advantage of those games in hands that they have and climb up the table. But it doesn't seem like that is happening, because they took a surprising loss to the Chicago Fire, and this was the CJ Sapong show, because he scored a hat-trick in this game, and he did it all in the first half. His first goal of what eventually was a hat-trick started in the 9th minute. Then he scored again in the 19th minute before completing his hat-trick in the 38th minute. Carlos Vela did get a goal right on the stroke of halftime for LAFC, but that was really the only goal that LAFC got, as in the second half, Chicago once again completely dominated in this game. And yeah, LAFC, something is definitely not going right with this team. And I understand that, you know, they are still above the playoff zone and that they are in the middle pack of the table in terms of the playoff spot, but you definitely do not expect that LAFC was going to be a team that is going to be in the middle of the table. Especially, a lot of people thought that they were going to win the Western Conference, and now they are really struggling and doesn't look like a team that was supposed to be the class of the Western Conference. But as the Chicago Fire, this was definitely an impressive victory, as they're going to need to continue to have these kind of victory if they want to push themselves above the red line. Now, moving on in terms of the next match. So, Philly, this week they once again play against another bottom feeder. This time they play against the second to dead last team in the Eastern Conference, that is the Columbus Crew. And unlike last week where they stumble against a last place team, NYCFC, this time they didn't stumble against a bottom feeder and able to bounce back with a 2-0 victory. Now, Fafa Pico scored the first goal for the Union, and you're probably thinking, why did Fafa Pico score the first goal against the Union? Isn't he with FC Dallas right now? Well, in this virtual world of FIFA simulation, we'll pretend that none of the transaction in the offseason actually happened, and all those players that were on the team last season for all of these teams before they move on to a new team this offseason, that did not happen this offseason. So hence that's why Fafa Pico did not actually win to FC Dallas, and that he actually stayed with the Union, and he scored a goal to give the Union a 1-0 lead at that point, before Sergio Santos pretty much put the cherry on top to give the Union a 2-0 lead and give them all 3 points against a Columbus Crew team that, yeah, they are continue to struggle in the Eastern Conference. And so much for a team that looked like they were going to be a dark horse team from this season, isn't it? I mean, this feels even worse than last season, and something tells me that, you know, I talked about how earlier Bruce Arena might be threatened to be a head coach that could potentially get fired from the New England Revolution. I might have to say the same thing about Caleb Porter. He might most likely be one of the head coach that could be on the hot seat with the way that Columbus continued to struggle like this. But yeah, moving on, in terms of the next match, is Minnesota. So for once, the Loons actually did not get all 3 points, and unfortunately they saw their winning streak come to an end against a Sporting KC side that looked like they're determined to try to get back to where they were in the beginning of the season. Kevin Molino scores the first goal in the 23rd minute to give the Loons a 1-0 lead before Felipe Gutierrez ties it up right on the stroke of halftime, and the game was tied up at 1-1 as we head into the halftime break. Now in the second half, Robin Lur did give the Loons the lead back, but it was very short-lived because Johnny Russell would score in the 74th minute to once again tie the game up at 2 apiece, and then both teams were really going for it in the last 15 minutes to try to get the winner of this game, but unfortunately none of them were able to do, and it ends in a 2-2 draw. And that, I think for the first time in a long time this season, Minnesota defense looked vulnerable in this game. Like, Minnesota, one of the reasons why they have been just so amazing and they're like the best team in the league isn't really due to the fact that they are a high-scoring team, although there's been time that they've been known how to score goals and kind of turn it up in terms of the goal-scoring department, but they're most known because that defense is basically rock solid and just untouchable. Well, in this game, not only it was not untouchable, but it looked very vulnerable, with SKC really at times looked like they were ripping that defense to pieces. And if it wasn't for some better finishing from SKC, they might have actually got all 3 points in this game, and they might actually hand Minnesota, I believe, their first loss this season. I don't recall the Loons actually have lost this season. That's how good they have been this season, and that's why they are the best team in the league. But having said that, you know, even though they didn't get a victory in this game, they at least got a point on the road, which that is definitely a great thing whenever you want to make it to the playoffs and potentially compete in this league. So yeah, even though they did have their winning streak comes to an end, at least they continue their unbeaten streak. And for SKC, you know, this is definitely very encouraging of the fact that they are looking to try to get back to where they were in the first couple of games of this season, which is actually be a very decent team, and trying to put behind that month-long spell where they just cannot get a victory whatsoever. But yeah, moving on, in the next match is another 2-2 draw. This time it's between the Rapids and FC Dallas, two mid-table team battle out each other, and in the end, both of them gets a point apiece. Brian Acosta scores in the 27th minute to give Dallas a 1-0 lead, but Kai Kamara scores not from his head this time, even though that's been something that I've been mentioning him do a lot since he tends to be the king in terms of heading goal. But this time he actually put a lovely strike to tie the game up for the Rapids before Shinyashiki would score in the 55th minute to give the Rapids their first lead of the game. But Dallas eventually would tie it just 8 minutes later from Rito Ziegler, and in the end it ends in an honors even draw from this game. And I think a point for both of these team is fair, considering like the way that they are in the middle of the table. Both teams were playing very even, and there wasn't really a lot that was separated in this game. And yeah, I think both teams will be happy to walk out a point and continue to try to stay in the playoff spot, and maybe even challenging for one of the top spot in the Western Conference. But yeah, moving on in terms of the next match is, speaking of the top of the table matchup, this was kind of a top of the table matchup, even though I know Minnesota is currently at the top of the Western Conference. This game felt like a top of the table matchup because both of these teams are literally in second and third, and they were really coming into this game with a lot of momentum. And in the end, it was RSL, the one that not only were able to continue their winning streak, but they really sent a message to the rest of the league that this is a team I think a lot of people should take seriously. They score first in the 33rd minute from Justin Marin to give them a 1-0 lead. Then Rusnak would score in the 51st to give them a 2-0 lead before Everton Luiz made it 3-0 against the Seattle Sounders. And this is a Seattle Sounders team that has not been a joke this season. Like, they continue to look as good as they were last season when they win MLS Cup. So to see the fact that RSL was able to just completely cut them to pieces and just dominate them like that is kind of a little bit surprising. But at the same time, it kind of also isn't surprising because RSL has been very good this season at home, as it's been the case for the past couple of seasons. Jordan Morris did score a goal literally before the full-time whistle was blown to give Seattle a consolation goal. But in the end, RSL with a massive 3 points and really just sending the message to the rest of the league that this is a team that everybody should take seriously. And I can't wait until whenever Minnesota play RSL next. That should be a heck of a matchup, and that would really be a proper top of the table matchup whenever both of these teams will face in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, moving on in terms of the next match is the Galaxy. Boy, oh boy, the Galaxy just cannot figure out the Dynamo Rubik's Cube puzzle. I mean, for whatever reason, whenever the Galaxy play against Houston, they always tends to struggle, no matter if they're playing at home or they're playing on the road. And that continued in this game as they lost 2-0 to the Dynamo. Mauro Manotas scores in the 26th minute to give them a 1-0 lead before Tommy McNamara would score in the 43rd to give a 2-0 lead for Houston. And that is all the goals that the Dynamo would need in this game, as the Galaxy got shut out in this game. Chicharito was pretty much non-existent. And I'll tell you what, you know, we talked about, I don't know if we talked about this before, but there's got to be a little bit concern about Chicharito in terms of his goal scoring. Like, it's been a long time since he have actually got on the score sheet, and this was a guy that they bought in to kind of replace Zlatan, but also supposed to be a guy that is going to be their main goal scorer, and yet he hasn't really showed up this season. And we mentioned how there was a lot of pressure coming in to this season, especially on Chicharito's shoulder, because of the money that the Galaxy gave to them. Well, not only now the pressure is even more immense on him, but this is looking more and more like a move that is a very kind of big money flop kind of move that we usually see a team does whenever they try to get a big name kind of player, but they don't really adapt it into MLS. And you just hope for the Galaxy that eventually Chicharito would turn it on, because right now it's just that big money that they pay Chicharito during this offseason look worse and worse every single game. The fact that he isn't on the score sheet. But yeah, moving on into the last game on this board is Orlando. So you notice I'm wearing an Orlando City jersey for this review. And the reason why I wear Orlando City in this review is they did something that they have never done before. And for the first time in their entire franchise history, I am proudly to say that Orlando City has finally beaten Atlanta United. Now, I know Atlanta fans are probably going to say, well, you know, this is not real life, okay? This is just a virtual world where, you know, if there's any time when Orlando is able to beat Atlanta, it might be actually in the virtual world. And they also would say that Josef Martinez was not playing in this game. And if Josef Martinez was playing this game, most likely Atlanta is going to win again, and he's going to score a bunch of goals against Orlando, because Martinez loved to score goals against Orlando City. But having said that, I'm pretty sure Orlando City won't care whatever excuses that Atlanta would give them in terms of talking about how this is their first victory in a virtual world, as they probably are celebrating the fact that they finally no longer have to hear this joke about how Atlanta has never lost to Orlando City. Because in this game, for the first time, Atlanta did lose to Orlando City, and it was a 1-0 loss that they suffered, with the only goal came in the 28th minute from Tesha Akindele. And the final whistle of this game, Orlando City fans not only was ecstatic, but the atmosphere after this game felt like Orlando City have just won an MLS Cup. I mean, that just shows you how much this actually meant to them, and that they are so thankful that for the first time ever, they actually beat they say their supposed hated rival, and that now they no longer have to endure the joke, the fact that they have never been able to beat their hated rival Atlanta in MLS history. And as I said before, I know Atlanta fans will point out the obvious, but I don't think Orlando City fans are going to really hear about it. But that being said, I am now going to switch sports and look at the last two games that happened in this match week number 9 simulated match week. But yeah, moving on is another rivalry match. This time it's the Atlantic Cup between DC versus the Red Bulls. And in this game, it was DC United able to get a 2-1 victory against their rival, the Red Bulls. Although early on, the Red Bulls looked like they were maybe going to go for a little bit of an upset in this game, because in the 32nd minute, Daniel Royer gave the Red Bulls a 1-0 lead. However, that lead was canceled out 11 minutes later from Julian Gressel to tie the game up at 1 apiece, before Ola Kamara would score in the 53rd minute to give DC a 2-1 lead, and that would eventually be the final score of this game, as DC are able to get the job done in this Atlantic Cup and continue to surge up the Eastern Conference table, while the Red Bulls, they are struggling so much that if you look on my right side where I'm about to talk about the standings of both conference after I finish reviewing the last game of this match week, they're dead last in the Eastern Conference right now. Speaking of teams that is dead last, the Quakes are also near dead last, and depending on if the Timbers are forced to forfeit the game against the Whitecaps and that the Whitecaps get automatic free points, they would be dead last in the Western Conference after this week. And in this game against FC Cincinnati, yeah, they lost 2-0 against FC Cincinnati. And as much as I want to say this was pretty impressive that FC Cincinnati was able to get a victory, consider it, you know, usually when they got a huge victory in the previous game, they have kind of a little bit of a letdown, and they give their fans a bit of a reality check that, yeah, that was just kind of like one brilliant moment, but now it's back to being a team that we kind of suck in a bit. But as much as I want to give that compliment, this was pretty much an automatic win for FC Cincinnati, because anytime when you're facing against the Quakes, whether they're at the top of the table or at the bottom of the table, you know they're not going to beat an Eastern Conference team. Like, the Quakes getting an Eastern Conference win, especially on the road, nevertheless, is as rare as them them potentially find their way at the top of the table. And in this game, it's unsurprisingly that FC Cincinnati was able to get the win. And Jurgen Locadia basically stole the show in this game, scoring a brace first in the 25th minute, then in the 90th minute to give FC Cincinnati a 2-0 lead, as FC Cincinnati continued to punch above their weight and continued to rise up in the Eastern Conference, which, you know, we'll see how long they can continue to do that, because right now the Eastern Conference table is a little bit tight, as I'm about to mention. And for the Quakes, yeah, there's really not a lot of hope, and you just hope that, you know, the only thing I hope the Quakes would do is that eventually they'll turn this around. But if they don't turn this around, you know what's going to happen with this franchise, and that we're going to have to clean the entire squad and just clean the entire front office, probably for the 4th time ever since we came back to the league in 2008. But now, with all the games that I have just mentioned, I am now going to be talking about the standings and where each team is at right now. And in the Eastern Conference, we got the Union with 19 points at the top of the table, but Orlando City is right behind them with 16 points. Then we have a pretty much a log jam between 3rd for all the way in the bottom of the table. There was only like 6 points separate from that spot. We had DC United at 12 points in 3rd place, with FC Cincinnati and Atlanta United tied with 11 points. But keep in mind, I think Atlanta does have a couple of games in hand, so they could find themselves back to 3rd place, or even go as high as 2nd place if they're able to win those games in hand. Then you have TFC currently with 10 points, another team that have a couple of games in hand. And then you have Montreal, who last week I mentioned they were dead last in the Eastern Conference, and this is what happened when you get a victory in the Eastern Conference, and that since it's such a logjam like this, if you get a victory, you can find yourself 1 week at the bottom of the table, and then the very next week you could find yourself above the red line. And right now Montreal just find themselves above the red line after last week they spent their time in the basement. Now they are tied with Chicago in 7th place and in that last spot of the playoffs with 9 points, while New England currently have 8 points, with NYCFC and Columbus tied with 7 points apiece. And as I mentioned before, the Red Bulls, who is now dead last in the Eastern Conference with just 6 points to their name. Looking at the Western Conference standing, we still have Minnesota, despite the fact that they didn't get a win this time. They still are at the top of the table, and really at the top of the Supporters Shield standing too, with 23 points so far. And so far, they're the only team that is able to get 20+ points throughout this season. Then it's followed by RSL, who, after that impressive victory against the Seattle Sounders, they leapfrogged them and jumped into 2nd place with 18 points. As I mentioned, the Sounders, after they lost to RSL, falls down to 3rd place with 16 points. Then we have LAFC and the Rapids with 14 points. Again, I know LAFC have some games in hand, but if they don't win those games in hand, they're not going to be joining RSL and Seattle in those top 2 spots, or even trying to chase down Minnesota, which even if they do win their games in hand, LAFC is not going to catch Minnesota if they're going to do that. And as I mentioned, the Rapids currently in 5th place, tied with LAFC in 4th place with 14 points. Then you got Dallas and Sporting KC are tied at 6th place with 11 points, followed by the Galaxy, who has really struggled for the past couple of weeks now, find themselves below the red line with 10 points. The Dynamo right behind them with 9 points. The Timbers have 7 points, and you know if they, depending on if that game is going to be replay, or if they're going to lose that replay game that they're going to be facing against the Whitecaps, they most likely will be stuck with just 7 points so far. Then it's followed by the Quakes, who currently have 5 points, and Vancouver, who's currently dead last in the Western Conference. Although, as I mentioned, if the Timbers forfeit that game against the Whitecaps, then the Whitecaps will find themselves, I believe, above Portland in 9th place, or in 10th place actually, and the Quakes would find themselves dead last in the Western Conference again. But either way, there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of the review for this match week number 9 of the simulated MLS season. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of all of these resources. And yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.